Here we go. I have a sobriety date. It's May 25th, 2005. I have a sponsor, Juliet. Um, and I have a sponsee, and I'm also temporarily sponsoring somebody, um, which is working out really well. They're both calling me every day, and that's not usual, but I'm very excited about that. And I have a home group that meets on Tuesdays in Pleasant Hill, Concord area, and it's a young people's women's meeting. Um, and it's a really good time. I have a commitment there. I show up every week. We always go out to dinner. It's a very comfortable meeting to go to for me. I feel like I can be very authentic. And that's something important with any meeting that I go to. I want to make sure that it's a safe place that I can be authentic, and that's what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I started drinking in high school. I was 15 when I had my first drunk, and it was awesome. I drank like 16 shots of vodka in like a minute because I got to the party late. So I felt like I needed to catch up. And that didn't go over so well later on in the night. But I just felt like I had arrived. Like I just cared so much growing up of what people thought of me, and cared so much of what I thought of myself. And I grew up very angry and very jealous my whole life, never wanted to be me. And so when I was able to get drunk and alcohol was introduced, it felt like I was free. And so I chased that for years down the line. I chased that feeling of freedom and carelessness, and I'm pretty surprised that I didn't get my ass kicked that night because I told people what I thought of them, and you know um, blamed it on the alcohol. So that was really awesome. um, Most of my drinking was away from my family. I went to Chico State out of high school, and it was a perfect place to uh, get hammered. So I went to Chico State. I had an older brother there, and he could buy me alcohol, and I was just pretty much drunk 24/7. I just drank around the clock, and I had a lot of blackouts and a lot of black eyes and a lot of waking up in weird places. And for a little bit it was funny, and it was like the college life or whatever, but it got really lonely really fast and very dark very fast. And in that first year at Chico State, I just like drank myself crazy. I tried to kill myself in the dorms, and I got 5150'd, and then got kicked out of those dorms. And that was the second dorm that I was in, because I got kicked out of the first one for drinking and doing other inappropriate things. And that was like all in the first year, and I just drank around the clock. I never wanted to be sober. And I was always very angry, and I was getting into fights, and I always like chose to fight with like the biggest guy at the party. And that didn't go over so well. So, whoops. But I was in the first year too. I also had my first seizure, my first grand mal seizure from drinking withdrawals, which then turned into a diagnosis of epilepsy. So I lost my license, still drove, but lost my license. And pretty much every time I drank after that, I would have a seizure because I would forget to take my medicine, and I would freak people out when I had seizures and I was going to the ER like all the time. And eventually I was homeless. I was living in my car. So I guess I wasn't homeless, but I was living in my car, and it was hell. And the only thing on my mind, it wasn't like, oh, I need to find a bed. It was like, I need to find a bottle. And that's all that was going through my head. That's all I wanted. I just had to be drunk all the time. Drugs are a part of my story. Came into contact with some little white powder, allowed me to drink a lot more, and so I very much enjoyed that. And the only reason I did it was so I could drink more, and that was it. And eventually what happened after I got 5150, I had to go home and do an outpatient drug and alcohol program, and I was 19 at the time. So I went and I told people what they wanted to hear. And I did all of that stuff so I could get back to Chico. And that's all that I wanted to do. I got back to Chico and things just got worse. Now I was in with like very paranoid people and hanging out at this one crack house and, doing some pretty shady things for Keystone Light. And so after that happened, kind of figured I had a problem, and I was, I was in trouble with the people that the cops were looking for. So I didn't get in trouble with the law. I got in trouble with the people that the cops wanted to bring in. And so after a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, I finally came back. I came back to Walnut Creek, where I grew up, and went back to my family and told them I needed help. And my last drunk consisted of me getting into a fist fight with my mom and jumping out of the window on the second story of our house and landing in the pool and running away for the night. And that was my last drunk. And unfortunately, many of my drunks before that weren't very different. It was just this time I got into a fight with my mom, and I had no idea that I was getting into a fist fight with my mom because I was so blacked out. And by this time I was like speaking my own language because I had drank myself so silly that I just wasn't even speaking English anymore. I was speaking Sarah. And what happened was I told my mom that I needed help, and so she picked up the phone and called this rehab in Oakland, California. And I guess I picked up the phone and I said, I need a shrink and I'm fucked up. And my mom was like, can she come now? And, and so 2 days later, I detoxed at home. It was lovely. 2 days later, I went into a 28-day program, and I stayed on the 5th floor of Alta Base in Oakland for 28 days. And I learned a lot about alcoholism and a lot about desperation. And I saw where my life was going. And that was a really big wake up call. I got sober when I was 20, and most of the damage that I had done was to my parents. So like when it came time, and I'm jumping ahead, sorry, but when it came time to do amends, like my amends were pretty much to my parents, because that's who I did the most damage to. And so when I got sober, I got out of the treatment facility, and H and I had come in and brought AA meetings into our rehab. And so I went to those meetings, and they also took us to outside meetings when we were in Oakland. And we went to this like called the Marble meeting in Oakland, and this one guy, or I remember saying, I'm Sarah, I'm an alcoholic, in my first 30 days, and like 300 people said, "Hi Sarah, welcome." And that was ridiculous. That was just crazy, because no one had wanted me around for quite some time. And with 300 people saying, "Hi Sarah, welcome," like it was creepy, but it was also like really, really wonderful. And then they did the chips, because it's a birthday meeting, but they call it the Marble meeting. I don't know why. And this guy who was like a million years old, he, of course, was in the back of the giant theater that we were in, but he went up for his 50-year chip. And I just looked at my counselor and I said, "I want that." And I was just like, tears were coming down my face. And he said, "You can have it. You just have to work for it." And so when I got out of treatment, my parents let me move back in with them. And the first thing I did was I went to, we call it Mayhew. It's our service center, and it's got a giant meeting room. And I just literally parked my car there and stayed. I went to so many meetings. I was young. I wasn't in school. Didn't have a job. I was not employable at that moment in time in my life. And so I had nothing to do. And the only thing that I did was go to this service center and sit there and go to a bunch of meetings. And I'm so grateful that I knew where to go. I'm so grateful that H and I came in and said, "Go to meetings," and said, "Get a sponsor and work the steps." I had no idea what that meant. But by going to a bunch of meetings and listening to what all these people had done who had like long-term sobriety, I listened to what they did, and I listened to the people that relapsed, and I listened to what they did, because I didn't want to do that. And that's exactly what I do today. I still continue to listen, and I go to meetings and I participate. And that's just one part of my treatment for my alcoholism. So I did get my first sponsor, and we met at a meeting every Monday. And then after the meeting, we would go to a coffee shop and work the steps and read out of the big book. And for my first step, we read more about alcoholism, and I highlighted the crap out of that. And then we went over that, what I highlighted, how it related to me. And that was my first step. And then continued to move through the steps and got to my fourth step. And I clearly did not listen to her. And I wrote down a list of people that I hated and why I hated them. And that was it. And I brought that to her. And she was so sweet. She was so patient with me. And so my fifth step took like 3 hours, because you're supposed to do 4 columns. I mean, if one of my sponsees is doing it for the first time, they do the first 3 columns, leave the last column blank, blah, blah, blah. Boring stuff. So anyways, went through that, and then my sponsor moved away, and I got a sponsor right away. I was only like 4 months sober at that time, so I needed someone who was close to me, and that still remains the same today. And so I got another sponsor, and she was like in the Army or something, and I had to call her every day for 30 days at 6 a.m. Back then, we like synchronized our watches because we didn't really use cell phones like we do today. But she literally said, let's synchronize our watches, and that like scared me. But it was what I needed at the time, and she was kind of a scary person. But it's really what I needed at the time, and she kept me accountable, and I called her every day for 30 days at 6 a.m. And she also took me through the amends process, and for my 8th step, I wrote down that list. I was on my 5th step, added some more people, and wrote letters to all of them, and then we went over them before I actually made the amends. And the hardest ones were my parents. Like I said, I did most of the damage that I had done was to my parents. And I have an older brother who's also in the program. He's been in and out for about 18 years. He's in right now, so that's great. But it took me about 10 years to make my amends to him. And I made amends to my sister, but she didn't really understand what I was doing. It was so weird. But anyways, yeah, so I like went through that amends process. I really didn't want to, but I knew that I wanted long-term sobriety, and I didn't want to end up going back out. And I'm still today very scared of that. So went through the rest of the steps and got to my 12th step, and realized that I had a spiritual awakening. And what happened for me was after that, I got to start taking people through the steps. A lot of people didn't stay. A lot of people weren't ready, and that's okay. And I've learned through the years that I can't keep people sober. You know, I can show them the steps. I can take them through the book. I can give away what was given to me. And that's all I can do. And so another thing that happened was I met my husband in the rooms. I met him through EBIPA, which is East Bay Young People and Alcoholics Anonymous. And we were a service committee, and we hosted Wacky Paw. And we were in Yosemite, and that was really cool. It was absolutely a spiritual experience. A lot of work went into it, and we actually got engaged that year, and we were like more focused on Wacky Paw than our wedding. And it's kind of funny because we realized like after Wacky Paw was over, we're like, oh my God, we're getting married in 6 months. We should probably like plan a wedding. And it's just so funny because service is like such a big part of my life that I forget that I have a life sometimes. So I'm trying to work on that whole balance thing. But another thing that's happened to me in sobriety is responsibility, and that's new. You know, I started going back to college, and everything that I did in college, AA has taught me. I knew how to study because I had highlighted out of my big book and underlined and written notes. And I had to learn how to read like all over again. Reading was very tough when I first got sober. But that big book has my saved my life, and it saved my serenity and sanity so many times. So I definitely cherish that and use that in my recovery quite a bit. And my current sponsor, Juliet, is very into the big book as well. So that is something that I love. And that's something she has that I want. I've been through 4 sponsors. 2 of them just kind of stopped doing AA. One decided that she wasn't an alcoholic, and by being around here and sticking around the rooms, like, I know how important it is to have a sponsor. And I can't do this thing by myself. I can't do the 12 steps by myself. I do need someone to take me through them, and I need somebody to be accountable to. And that's where Juliet comes in. And, I get to sponsor other people too, and that's pretty cool. Like, having somebody trust you that much to tell you their 5th step is pretty incredible. And I'm so grateful that I get to do that. I've been through really good things in sobriety, and I've been through really bad things in sobriety too. Like, I feel like I've been to way too many funerals for people who thought that maybe they could do it one last time. And so that's really heartbreaking, but it is like a reminder that it is one day at a time for me. And I do show up. I'm of service. And like I said, unfortunately, I've been to a few too many funerals. But I've like also been to a lot of great things. Like, I got to help deliver my sister's baby. I got to help deliver my sister-in-law's babies. I loved my job today. I went to nursing school and I got kicked out of nursing school. And then I had to fight to get my license, and needed to know I had to do a lot of work. Like, everything that I have in my life has not been handed to me, unfortunately, but that also like makes me appreciate a lot more the things I have in my life. So I get to wake up in a bed today. Like, that's pretty cool. It's those little things that remind me, like, of the simple things that I get to enjoy in life as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm very grateful that I got to be here and speak and share something with you. I hope that you got. And that's it. Thanks.